their inability to keep a grip on their culture is killing people.
Literally, like people are literally dying because of this. Episode 195 of the Dan Bradbury Podcast. I'm Topher Morrison, the house guest that never goes away.
You're hoping to seal the deal. You're hoping if you get to 200, you can become a permanent addition.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's like, well, if I'm on the 200th episode, I have to be a permanent fixture.
Actually, I really quite like to do this. I haven't asked you permission, but I don't care. Like, write in, vote. Does Topher stay or does he go? Let's do like a gladiatorial thumbs up, thumbs down.
You. Oh, please. May I have a cup of porridge?
Now that we've made him move over from the United States of America, he's relocated, come to a different continent.
Now,
do we send him home?
in or out of the country? Yeah. No, it's not just should he stay on the podcast. Should he stay in the country?
I could ring up customs right now. I know what to say to those guys.
This is a befitting conversation because today's topic is about culture in the workplace.
What I love about that is, just for the listeners who might think we really think about this stuff in scripted. Nope,
that one completely came off the cuff. I didn't even tell you about the house guest joke.
Do you want to tell it now? It'll be seamless post-edit.
I literally just did it. I'm the house guest that never leaves.
Right. Yeah, no, I just took that and ran with it. Well, look, here's the point. So to get into this, we've got to be straight into content. Chad, we're listening to you. Straight into content. The old turnover is vanity, profit is sanity, cash is king, or cash flow is king. One of my mastermind members, Sonia Gill. Hello, Sonia.
Amazing woman.
Jumped on that one time and said, hey, if cash is king, culture is queen.
And
I think she is so right on. Because at the root, Topher, at the root of business, you've got the benefits that you give the business. So you add value to your clients, and there's ways that you make it proprietary. You've got better products. You've got better service. There's a process by which you create that value. Like, how do you have the best product? How do you have the best service? But the source of that value creation comes down to two things. It comes down to people, having the right people on the bus, but culture. You can have the right people,
but wrong culture.
If they're not behaving the right way, it's kind of the obvious kind of a football analogy. Like, you can put a superstar, like a Ronaldo, on Manchester United, right? Or like a superstar player, but it doesn't change the culture, or the culture can be toxic, and it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
So you need both. You need great people that can do the job, that are competent, that are committed, but you also need them to behave. And culture is about how you behave. And that is the secret sauce to making companies really sizzle.
And culture, by the way, is a very big issue with not just large corporations, small business as well, but it's permeated through the news. What's the news of the week?
Big news article today, climate of fear puts patients at risk. So this is from one of the largest NHS trusts, Topher, where whistleblowers have said that there's a culture of fear, right? They said that the trust was behaving a bit like the mafia. I forget what the governing body that checks on doctors is, but whatever the name of the body, the threats from the bosses was like almost like, hey, if you complain, if you whistleblow, if you say about where some of our standards are not quite up to scratch, we're going to report you to the doctor's equivalent of an ombudsman. And I think
that's like throwing the medical establishment back 50, 60 years before we had statistical process control and the ability for nurses to challenge the intellectual decisions of doctors.
Right. I wonder where you're going with that. It's not like you're reading a textbook to me for a second, but before we have statistical, but yeah, you're right. As in, it's appropriate.
Every once in a while, I say something smart.
Well, it's interesting. There's a great book. There's not the book of the week, but a fabulous book. The most recommended book on the Tim Ferriss show. In fact, abstract over. See if you've read this. The Checklist Manifesto.
I have not read that book yet, but you have recommended to me in the past, talked about it, and you said it's amazing.
It's brilliant. I mean, there's a lot of things.
We'll have to make that the book of the week in the next
week.
Another week.
But there's one bit in there about again, about what causes problems and deaths in hospitals, and it's infection. And when they got to the root of a lot of why it happened, it was because the doctors were ruling the roost, and the nurses didn't feel comfortable to say, doctor, like, you've missed that, or you haven't cleaned that properly, or you've skipped a step. Right? So it was adherence, i.e. it was a cultural thing. It wasn't that the process of what should be done in the order wasn't mapped out or trained. It was the fact that it was the person that should be doing the task wasn't being challenged. And there was a culture that was like, oh, well, they're in charge here, so how can little
they
old
must
me
know? Yeah.
Right. And so I think it was, I'm looking through the article now to find it, but I think it was 26 of its doctors. Here we go. This particular trust referred 26 of its doctors to the General Medical Council, which ultimately investigate whether a doctor's fit to practice. And do you know how many of those doctors were prosecuted following a full investigation?
I'm guessing 0.
0, right? And so, and they were saying it was retribution for whistleblowing. And even though it's now been blown open and saying, oh, this is one of the worst performing NHS trusts in the company, in the country. And so,
just appalling.
And ultimately, their failure to get a grip on the culture is killing people.
Literally. like this is one of those things where people are literally dying.
Right. And so those listening, okay, you might go, I mean, it affects all of us because, if you're using the NHS for anything, but it also affects you as a small business owner. How? Because how are you creating a culture that's suboptimal?
Right.
How are you creating a culture which allows people to either...
he's the boss. He must know everything.
Correct. Well, it can take many different forms. It can take entitlement. I mean, on a macro scale, entitlement is a big thing, which means people become like spoiled children, right?
Yeah.
If you take a child, you give them everything in the world, give them whatever they want, all the support that they want, don't ever challenge them, they become spoiled little brats, right? I don't know why I moderated that word. I was going to go for a stronger word, but it felt inappropriate.
Stronger little shits?
Yeah, there you go. He said it, not me. Complaints to Topher? No. So
believe me, if anybody listening to your podcast is offended by a swear word, they don't know you.
I'm going to say, I will say, if they're offended by the swearing on this podcast, like, they are a wallflower. Like, they are asking to be offended. Do you know what I mean? It's like you're asking to be punched in the face. It's like, turn the podcast off.
That reminds me of back in the day.
I feel we're about to go down a dangerous path.
No,
go ahead.
There's a shock jock in America called Howard Stern. I'm sure you've heard of him, right? And they started doing some data analysis on his listeners, and like the average Howard Stern fan would listen for like, I don't know, making this up, like 38 minutes. But the average Howard Stern hater would listen for like 56 minutes.
Right.
And that's when he started getting, I need to be more offensive.
Yeah, that's interesting. Anyway, so look, how are you creating this culture? You've got to think about the culture and the environment that you're creating.
By the way, speaking of people liking shows, if you're liking the show, make sure you do a like, subscribe, comment, and 5 stars.
Good plug.
There we go.
And talking about culture and major cultural screw-ups takes us to the fail of the week. So, you know what? Love him or hate him, and if I'm honest, I'm a little bit of both, depending on the context. This week's fail of the week is the world's richest man, Mr. Elon Musk.
He has certainly got some culture challenges happening right now at one of his companies. Maybe... I was going to say, maybe he has it at Tesla, but there's nobody at Tesla. It's all robots. But definitely he's got some challenges right now at Twitter in culture.
Right. I mean, what do you think's going on? I mean, this is fascinating from so many levels about the deal, the acquisition. Was he got himself into a bind and he couldn't bail out of it? But
I think so. I think he was the dog that caught the bumper.
Right. And here's where it's interesting, Topher, because obviously we're time-stamping this episode, right?
Yeah.
And so we might say something now, and in 6 months...
totally false by the time it airs.
If you think about Elon, because we've got to be careful, because we're saying it's a fail of the week, so we're marking it out as like a bad thing.
Yeah.
And in a year or two's time, we could go, we were dead wrong about that.
I think he is genius enough. That's probably more likely than not. But it doesn't change the fact that there's a lot of turmoil happening right now.
Yeah, well, yeah. I was going to say, because you're betting against a man that has taken on multiple industries. But I'm pretty sure it's true to say he's the only person that's created 3 multi-billion-dollar valuation companies. Oh, sorry, 300 billion valuation companies from scratch.
I think you might be correct.
And you're like, in industries that are like, who wants to go into automotive? Unbelievable. And yet we're going, okay, but has he screwed up with Twitter? I'm gonna make a stance and say he has.
Okay.
And here's my evidence to support that.
Okay, good, because I'm going to make my statement after you're done, and I'll see if it's the same.
So here's the shoehorning. So when I was chatting to Warren Buffett the other day, by chatting, I mean reading his material.
Yes.
But having a conversation in my mind.
Yeah.
One of the things I love about that guy is he says all the time when he's screwed up. Like, so the number of times in his letters to shareholders when he goes, hey, 3 years ago, I told you this company was bumper and it was going to do this and it was going to do that. And I was dead wrong.
Yeah.
I screwed up. So even the most successful investor of all time, and there's all these successes and evidence, there's plenty of times when he's screwed up big that's cost him a lot of money.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's my evidence to go, you know what? Elon Musk has, a bit like Jeff Bezos, has achieved unimaginable success and greatness and achieve things that nobody on the planet has done, right? But that doesn't mean you've got a 100% record. And I think on this one, I think he's going to look back on this in a few years and go, it's done. It wouldn't surprise me if Twitter doesn't even exist.
Interesting that far. So your logic then is that he's due for a failure. Is that your logic, or is there something else behind it?
Yeah, I'll append it slightly. Like a step too far. It feels like he not just he's due by the law of averages, but more like he's got his main things, are still his main things, and then almost as a side habit, it kind of got out of control, and then all of a sudden, I don't see this master plan. Like people are talking about how he's got this big vision for Twitter as well.
Yeah. And
for me, I kind of go, no, it smells more like he's had a whimsical idea as an afterthought, and he caught the dog that caught the bumper, and it's like, oh, okay, is he going to pivot and take his focus off these in order to do this? I don't think he is.
Yeah. And the other thing is his grand vision isn't that grand. It's just a copycat of WeChat.
Right.
So here's my theory on this one, and I hate to say that because I absolutely admire this guy and I think he's a genius. But here's why I think this could be his. I don't necessarily think it's going to be his downfall, right? Yeah. But it could be. And here's why.
Zuckerberg's, I think, on a bit of a downfall right now.
Right. Yeah. Here's why I think this is going to be a fail for him. If you look at where his wheel of genius is at, it's all in systems. It's in logic. It's all in the mechanics and the science of things, right? It's not on the human side of things. Show me a company that he's developed which has something to do with heart and people. And this is the other thing, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe, and this is something that he has admitted publicly, is that he is on the spectrum.
Okay.
Yes. He's got Asperger's.
Yes.
Right? He's on light Asperger's syndrome. So I think, what are the ramifications of somebody who has a medical condition in their inability to communicate effectively being in charge of a communications company? That's
really interesting. Definitely. It's beyond my remit to comment on the Asperger's or anything like that. But I was going to make the comment is, have you noticed a lot of the really big guys, and by big, I mean by companies by capitalization, resonate with that? So I don't know. I can't even speak to whether it's diagnosed or not, but there's definitely opinions about whether it is with Bill Gates, with Zuckerberg, where you're going to go, they've got this tendency which gives them certain positive consequences, right? But also there is negatives. Like it's a double-sided coin, right?
By the way, one of the most intriguing TED Talks I've ever watched was about Asperger's. I hope I'm saying it, Asperger's syndrome and autism on the spectrum. And if you Google this, you'll be able to pull it up. Where there's this, he's an anthropologist, and he is showing some anthropological evidence that people who are, because if you look at the amount of people that are being diagnosed with Asperger's and autism is through the roof right now, especially in America, right? It's way higher than it's ever been. And he talks about evolutions while they have these slow rates of change, but there gets to a point where all of a sudden there's a leap. Yep. And his theory is that people with Asperger's and autism may actually be the next evolution of Homo sapiens.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right, because they are a hyper-focused genius in one area, and they're having a hard time communicating. Yeah, it's really an incredible TED Talk.
I love that. Yeah. I'm gonna check that out. Yeah, we'll put that link in the show notes because I'm gonna check that out. And I wish I hadn't said that hyper-focused genius bit, because I was about to, because that kind of makes me sound extremely arrogant with the next comment, which was, so my partner. So you know her. She's autistic, so she's been diagnosed. So is
she?
Yeah, so she's on the autistic spectrum, as are several of her siblings, and so her mother, being a single parent for raising a lot of kids, she's one of 7. Is a speaker, professional speaker, like in the area and an expert in that area, and has also got a TED Talk on the topic, but not anthropologically. Yeah. Too much coffee. Related. But anyway, I digress. Oh my word. And cut.
Yeah, but funny that we're sitting here talking about communication and neither one of us can get the message out right now.
They've said to me, multiple members of that family who are on the spectrum have said, "Oh yeah, like you'd be on the spectrum, like if you went and got tested." And I'm like, "Why?" And then they give me this evidence for this hyper focus thing, right? And also my anal Rain Man thing with numbers, right? Like, you don't like talking to people, and you can't remember what we did last night. My partner will say to me, but she's like, "You can remember a client's balance sheet from 3.5 years ago." And I'm like, "Yeah,
that's a good point."
And then she'll say that, and then I'll deliberately like say how much cash a certain client had in the bank, and then I'll go and look up the balance sheet if it's and see if it's correct. And you know what it normally is.
Wow. Anyway. Let's move on. Let's talk about so we've made our predictions about Elon. We'll see how wrong we are in the future.
I know. I'm already squirming. We've just basically said the wealthiest man on the planet, self-made entrepreneur. We've just said, yeah, he's wrong and he's going to fail.
Yeah.
I feel like
I want to rewind this so bad, right? We're committed.
There should be tumbleweed. We should have just left that pause and put tumbleweed as a backdrop. So with all that said, let's go from a failure to a hero of the week.
Who's the hero of the week?
The hero of the week is Georgia Kirke from Right Business Results. So that's rightbusinessresults.com.
And totally deserves this title this week for sure.
Right. Because, I mean, first of all, the company, basically they help you massively elevate your personal brand, right? Mm-hmm. Whether it be books, blogs, podcasts. Georgia's team helped me with my last book. They've helped me with the book that I've written that's going to come out next year.
Yep.
Note how I've gone from next quarter to next year now.
Yeah, interesting. You've delayed.
I'm learning, my friend.
Yeah.
But that's not why she's hero of the week. The reason why she's hero of the week is because she's doing such a great job. Her business is naturally growing, expanding. Check them out at rightbusinessresults.com. And consequently, they need to hire.
Yeah.
Right. And in hiring, one of the most important things, you've got to get the right people. But what's the easiest way to increase your chances of making a successful hire?
I know the answer to the question. It is deal flow, my friend.
There you go. He's learning.
I'm listening.
He is learning, right? So yeah, deal flow, right? As in, my old joke is, what do most business owners do? They get desperate. They put a shitty job ad together. They because it's a shitty job ad, they get like 3 responses. Yep. They invite all 3 to interview. 1 doesn't show up. 1 shows up drunk, so the last one gets the job, i.e.
by default, yeah.
Correct. The least shitty of a pretty darn shitty bunch.
Yeah.
So a solution is deal flow, because by deal flow, good stands out.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
A bit like if you're doing property, like how do you know if this house is a good house? Well, if you've seen 10 other houses of the same number of bedrooms in the same area, you get a feel for if the price is good or not.
But if you've seen 100, you have a much accurate.
Correct. So where Georgia knocked it out of the park for me is, I forget the specific number, which is unfortunate, but she got a crazy...
I know the over number.
She got a crazy high number of applicants for the job.
She had over 1,000 applicants
Oh, my word.
for this job. Over 1,000 applicants for this job, which says so many things, right? Number one, really great description for her job. She spent good time writing a great job.
And a place where people want to work, right? They saw the appeal. But it gives her another problem now, which is, of course, then, okay, what's your process and your system, which she's got nailed and she's working on to get that down to find the right one efficiently and speedily.
Yeah, and in fact, what's interesting is in your interview that you had with her at the Success Mastermind, she went through that whole process and how she finally got to the actual job offer, which I thought was fascinating. She was much more systematic this time than she's ever been in hiring somebody. So fantastic onto her for sure. In fact, do you want to cut to the interview?
Come on, everybody. So I'm going to throw a lot of questions at Georgia, and then we'll open it up to you as well. But we're going to have to be quick fire because we've got 4 people in this segment. So Georgia, first of all, for those that don't know, so for the new people in the room and on Zoom, tell us who you are and what your business does.
Thanks, Dan. My name's Georgia Kirke. I run Write Business Results, and we help entrepreneurs write books and build their platform with blogs and podcasts. Okay, and in addition, you were the... Let me get the year right. 2021 Entrepreneur of the Year. Correct.
Oh, give a round of applause for that. Okay, so your business has gone through significant change, evolution over the last 12, 18 months. Yeah. But I'm going to dive straight in on a relatively tactical bit, but a thing that was relevant in this room. Topher alluded to it. It was one of the things when we were looking for people who had things to share in the hot seat, stood out to us, was on a recent bit of recruitment that you had about the sheer volume and the lead gen. Because I think when it comes to recruitment, Alejandro said yesterday, great quality people, he was specifically talking about management, but great people are everything. Mm-hmm. And yet one of the problems that people have when they're trying to find great candidates is just deal flow, right? Getting enough people to apply to the job. So tell us what happened, what was going on in the business, and how did you end up with approximately 1 trillion people apply for this one individual role?
Thanks, Dan. So I've had the luxury of working with a couple of A players for the last couple of years, and they're absolutely fantastic. And building out the employed team, bringing the freelance roles in-house, maybe like probably a few entrepreneurs, you sometimes don't imagine that people don't have the same work ethic as you, or they're not going to do things in the same way as you. And so I introduced a couple of people that I then removed from the business earlier this year who were not A players, and it took me a little while to realise what actually was going on, and that it wasn't a training gap, and that pouring energy into wrong fit people was obviously not going to produce anything worthwhile for me or them. So I then decided to look at recruitment strategy and made a few changes to in our marketing service. I decided to bring in a couple of copywriters to report into the sort of what I would now call my management team, instead of bringing in more people at that level. And that was what the recruitment campaign was around. It was people with up to 2 years experience copywriting to come and write up blogs and social media and promotional emails. So people with the foundations, but I wanted to be able to sort of mould them into Write Business Results specific.
And how, because a lot of people, when it comes to the job ad specifically, they just throw together whatever and then they get, half a dozen responses, and that's it. Was it to do with, what did you do in relation to the writing of the ad, and how was it different, I suppose? Or was it to do with the places that you placed the advert, or both?
It was both. So initially, I actually did 2 separate sort of outreaches, I suppose, for this role. In the first instance, we got 150 applicants, and that was mostly through LinkedIn, and then 3 came through the teams sharing it on social. And the job ad was written according to a template that me and the team had just sort of created previously for other applications we had put out there. And so we did, what we thought was best with that. And that's worked previously. We haven't had many candidates. I say for editing roles, we might get 50 or something. But it's quite a niche role. So those 50 would be better quality, I've realised, than if you put out a junior marketing position, which a lot of people might say they can do, or a lot of young people might want to do. And it's kind of, there's a lot more sifting involved. So I realised that the quality of the ad for something a bit more general or something that could be more broad is really, really important. Of those 150 that came in the first round, only one was interviewable. The rest, I don't know why they applied. It was confusing and laboursome. So we rewrote the ad, and this time we put a lot more deliberate thought into it for that specific role. We shortened it. We put a salary range rather than a salary amount. I changed the job title to be more keyword specific, and then treated it like a piece of content and just filled it with keywords after doing a bit of keyword research. Just made sure it was very, very specific and targeted to the people.
So I think you just spoke to it, but you can't tease us. Give us a couple of top tips for writing a great job ad. So what's the difference between the ad that, because we'll talk about the filtering in a moment, what's the difference between ad A and ad B if ad B gets 3 times the response of ad A? What would you advise people to think about when they're testing things?
Just think a bit like you're writing a promotional email, for example. The subject line is you just want it to be the thing that gets people to open, and it's the same with the job title. So initially the job title was content marketing executive because it's a relatively junior content marketing role. It covers a lot of different types of content. Actually, when I looked at that later, I was a bit like, I don't know why that didn't make sense for me to have done that, and it's content copywriting. But when I did some research on the role titles on what was being advertised on other job sites, it didn't make sense to just say copywriting, because that is also too broad. And it didn't make sense to say a content marketer, because that's also too broad. And it also didn't make sense to call it copy editing, because that also relates to things like journals and manuals. And so it was that in itself was really key. So content copywriter, while it may not sound like a typical job title, keyword wise, was very specific.
I love it. Now, so the specificity is critical. And let's talk about placement. So you spoke about LinkedIn. Was that a paid ad? Was that just shared on LinkedIn? How LinkedIn or broader? Let's talk about the placement. Where do you find certain sources more productive than others for generating leads?
Knowing what I know now, I wouldn't use LinkedIn again for job ads. So the first one was done completely on LinkedIn, not boosted by any ads. The second rewritten one I put back out onto LinkedIn, but I also put it onto Indeed and boosted on both platforms £6 a day. And I found Indeed to be really, really superior. There's way better filtering. The platform itself is easier to use in terms of working through them all. I was able to add in comprehension tests as well as like other proficiencies. And also you can ask for voice notes instead of a cover letter. But then, of course, what then happens is that there's a discrepancy, right, between the people that have come in through one platform versus the people who've come in through the other. And so then how do you do it fairly? So then I used Test Gorilla to do the same comprehension tests on the LinkedIn candidates.
So let me dive a bit deeper there. So some people are here going, okay, great. So I can try and be really specific with the job ad. I can place it on different platforms. And then actually their biggest fear is that they succeed and get several hundred candidates. Now what? So I suppose a strategic level, talk to us. There will be people in here that have just placed an ad, got a handful of responses and just decided who they're going to interview and then interviewed them. But you can't do that when you've got 100 plus responses. So what do you think about either giving this specific job role as an example or broader than that? What was your mechanisms for filtering those down?
So yeah, I mean, shall I say the number of what came in through the
Yeah, please.
Okay, no. So the first ad was 150. The second ad produced 1,135 applicants.
1,135 applicants. Yeah. I mean, just think about it. What are your odds of succeeding? Right? How much higher are they if you get 1,100 rather than 150? Right? I mean, it's close to 8x, 10x the chances of finding that A player. You've just then got a different problem, which is how do you then filter, right? So, I mean, copies, and I'm preaching to the converted, but copies it's where all the leverage is at in business. It's rare that you're going to get a salesperson that has 1,000% better sales conversion than another salesperson, right? That's rare, but that is not that uncommon when it comes to copy. Just different words can elicit a radically higher response. But then it gives you a different problem called you've got to filter these, because I'm guessing you can't. I'm guessing you weren't enamored with the idea of reading 1,100 CVs and then trying to contact them all. So what did you do to filter them quickly?
Sonia and Jodie Rogers were both WhatsApping me. Sonia knew I was going to do this. She actually called me. It was like 7 o'clock one evening, and she was like, "I've just seen your message about 1,100 applicants. Do not look at all 1,100 and help me come up with a filtering process," which because I would have done it otherwise. Because with it being the first time I'd managed to get so many in so successfully, I was like, I'd better be involved in every step of this way. Otherwise, I might miss a beat. And anyway, but no, don't look through 1,100 CVs. So what I did was making sure that the filters were really, really tight. Now, the role itself, it means that they have to read transcripts from book recordings and podcast recordings and blog recordings and turn those into more blogs, social posts, promotional emails. But it's not just sort of shortening them, it's proper repurposing of the content, i.e. it should work specifically for the format it's being repurposed into. So when I got there, kind of, first of all, was the reading tests, verbal reasoning and written tests. It was amazing to me how many people that applied for that role couldn't read properly or draw meaning from sentences and had issues with writing and with verbal reasoning. It was unbelievable. And I understand.
We'll just pause. It's funny, as business owners and a lot of employees in this room, it's unbelievable, but it's not, is it? Well, we've all, even if you take away from this role, who here has tried to hire a salesperson and they've had an applicant for a salesperson and you're thinking, it's a bit early, it's not 10 o'clock, oh, what the hell? Close your ears, Jensen. What the actual fuck? You can't sell anything. You can't even dress yourself reasonably. This is absolutely astonishing, and yet they're applying for a sales role. Right? Anyway, sorry, I'm just getting a bit big to meldrew.
It's true though, but yeah, I would definitely don't take it for granted that the people applying are anywhere near suited. So the first thing was sifting through that many was looking for the most basic criteria. Do they have 2 years of experience in this role?
And how many did you chop out, just for context? How many of the 1,100 just went off, just guesstimate from that first?
About 700.
Yeah. So it's almost 80-20 rule. Yeah. It's kind of, okay, done. That's saved you an awful lot of CV reading time.
And then I also deleted the ones that hadn't completed the tests I'd asked for in the filters. They'd literally just clicked attach CV. So I didn't need to give those any time either. And that took it down to a couple of hundreds. And then from those ones who had passed all the tests, I then sent out an online skills and knowledge quiz that I'd done in Typeform. So this is where I broke it down into 5 segments. One was about the company, one was about the world of content marketing and copywriting. Then it drilled down a bit into specific formats. I asked for some sample client emails. I gave them some scenarios and said, how would you apply? And I also asked them for practicals. So taking real client content and seeing how they'd repurpose it. And that was really interesting. And that got it down to, that was how I determined who should be interviewed, basically, after that.
Great. So you got it down from 1,100 to 400 to 200 with these highly leveraged filters. And then you got it down to how many did you interview?
Between 20 and 25 went to the first interview. I used the Who framework by Jeff Smart for the interview. So 3 interviews and the reference interviews. Yeah, good.
In fact, who in this room has read Who, the book Who by Jeff Smart? Okay, good. If you haven't, give yourself a Christmas present. The book Who by Jeff Smart is a great framework. In my opinion, the best. It's less than 200 pages long. It's a simple read, just a really great framework for recruiting for small business. So, and then who was doing the interviews? How long were the interviews? I'm not asking you to teach the framework from the book, but what did that look like? Because some people here are just going, oh my God, but I've got to do 25 interviews to decide who to hire. What was the format for that?
I nearly did all of them as well, but no. So again, I think Sonia stopped me just in the nick of time. So the 2 other A players on the team did the first interviews, which is 30 minutes or so screening. And then our HR consultants did the second interviews, which is going through their CV line by line and sort of asking around, challenging.
And was there a cut between interview 1 and 2?
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, just to spell it out, so there was Georgia got leverage from her team doing the first round interviews, a short interview, and immediately that took it from 25 down to
How many between interview 1 and interview 2? I think there were probably 12 going through to interview 2.
Yeah, so
by about
halved it, and then it got more intensive, but there was still leverage from a HR consultant to do a deeper dive into the CVs. Good.
Yeah.
And then interview 2 to 3. How many?
Interview 2 to 3. A couple of people dropped out, which I wasn't expecting. Just emailing saying we won't be continuing. And I think that's kind of, I found that interesting because when we work on content for people, we talk about the power of it qualifying clients to come to you, but also disqualifying, because when they read something, and the same thing happened through this process, which I was, grateful for because it saved us time.
Yes.
So I think actually we invited 11 or 12 to interview 2, and I think we did 8.
Okay, so you got 8, great. And then how many passed interview 2 and made it to interview 3?
3.
Did you come in at interview 3?
I did interview 3.
Great. So of 8, effectively, your HR consultant gave you the top 3, and then you jumped in.
So we have this on a Google sheet, and tab 1, interview 1, etc. And then the greens were the ones, and there were notes as well from the people that had done them. And the greens were the ones that we all felt should go through to the next round. So I did this with Kat and Ivan, who have worked with me for several years.
Right. So was it like a traffic light system?
Yeah, traffic light system. And so so the greens, I looked at those and decided to put 3 through to the last one. And that meant by that point we'd all met the final candidates. And out of that, there were 2 who were it was really evident that it was going to be between those 2. But do you know what? All 3 of them had, what stood out to me against the earlier ones, they'd all done a lot of research on the company and me personally. So they were all like, when it came to what are your questions for us, they were like, oh, I've only got 1 or 2. To be honest, this has been so thorough. And actually, I downloaded your ebook and I read your, I've read your blog. I've checked out Kat's and Ivan's blogs. I feel like I've got a good grip on who they are and how you all work. So that was quite handy from a cultural perspective.
I love it. And finally, because I'm being reminded, we've got 4 interviews, not 1, because I could stay here all day. What? Any final top tips? So for anybody listening to this, George, you're trying to think about recruiting in the new year. Any final additional takeaways or thing you want to underline from what you've already said?
I think probably a couple. Just the job ad itself, it's worth putting time in and don't compromise. If you get a load of crap applicants, like don't pick one out of the least sort of rubbish one. Kind of really rewrite it and bounce it off people and do a bit of research on the other job sites to see what else is out there. And then for me, what stressed me out at first, especially with the volume, was the lack of process. So I'm happy to share the spreadsheet or anything else if it's going to be helpful. Just have some steps to follow and just delegate whatever you can. But definitely be involved in obviously all the sort of final decisions. And then the last thing was I also use Colby A Index to help me with those final 3. And this looks at how people naturally take action rather than their IQ or their personality. It's what are their creative drives. And I wanted to make sure, we do this with all the team, so I wanted to make sure that they would be a good fit just in terms of, on day 1, and they're not going to be supervised. We don't manage people necessarily. They're going to self-manage. How are they going to kind of naturally do that? So that was really handy.
I love it. Absolutely fantastic. Then, gentlemen, give George a round of applause. Thank you, George. Thank you.
Great interview from a dynamic business owner, for sure. I cannot wait, because I think all of the stuff that she said in that interview was very relevant for anybody listening who has to be hiring. But more importantly, I can't wait to see how the next hire for her goes, right?
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. Let's get to Book of the Week. Right, so this is very special for me, Topher. In fact, I'm going to prove this. I own multiple copies of this book, and
okay, to be fair, the reason why you own multiple copies is just because you don't know where you put the other one down, so you just order another one because it'll be arriving tomorrow from Amazon.
Yeah, well, that might be true, but the reason why that's helpful, Topher, is because I never want to be more than arm's length away from this book. In fact, Topher, this is such a bold, ridiculous claim, but because I happened to speak to the author yesterday, and once again, the man blew my mind, and he has been doing for over 10 years.
Yes.
That at least 80% of my waking hours, I'm never less. I've got one in my bedroom. I've got one in my desk. I've got one right here beside me right now in the studio. The book is The Road Less Stupid.
By great book.
Keith J. Cunningham.
Yeah.
So all I'm going to say is it's an MBA. Right, it hands down is a business MBA. If you have not read that book and you're a business owner, just order it now, read it, thank me later.
I think that the important thing here is to show, and that's not contrived. I mean, yes, you brought the book for the podcast because we knew you were going to be talking about it. But I know for a fact, I've seen multiple copies of that book in your house.
Right.
I know for a fact that you're not just being, hyperbolic when you say it's an arm's reach away. It literally is. And I think the important thing here is that you've read that book how many times?
I can't even tell you. It's because it really is his opus. So Keith's written 3 books, and this is really his opus. He's in his 70s now. He's mentored me for well over 10 years, and it's just bite-sized chunks. So 30, 40 chapters in that book, but perfect for different topics. And a lot of the topics, Topher, are to do with culture, right?
Yeah.
Like, so Keith is a master. I mean, Keith's the man that taught me financial literacy. If you think I'm smart with numbers, he was the genesis. He was the one that took me from being financially illiterate to literate, and started me on that path. But he really opened my eyes about culture and the importance of culture. And there's so many gems in that book about culture.
I can tell you one that I love, because he just rips on people that have nap pods nowadays in businesses. And he goes, I'm paraphrasing a bit, but trying to echo his awesome, witty
Texas drawl.
Yeah, Texas drawl, right? He's like,
I know, I need you to do the accent.
I could probably do a Texas accent a little bit better than my Australia one in previous episodes. Culture, actually now.
That was quite good.
Yeah.
All right, just do the line.
Yeah. Culture isn't nap pods. Culture's how you treat people.
That's
There was a terrible accent. I'm blank. I've been in the UK too long. I don't even know my British. I can't confuse my Australian and my British and my Texas twang. I don't get it anymore. I'm losing touch with my roots.
George Bush. Anyway, so the point is, culture's not culture's not features and benefits, right?
Yeah.
Culture is how you treat people. That's me paraphrasing Keith there.
Yeah.
Right. It's not nap pods. It's not like having a cereal bar. Like that's like features. People think that's culture, and that doesn't even create culture.
Right.
Right. That can actually create entitlement. Right. I'm all for having a cool place to work, but actually be clear. It's like, how do you have a high performance culture? And there's several chapters on this book on that topic, and it's worth its weight in gold.
Yeah. In fact, interestingly enough, the chapter, I think it might even be chapter 7. Open it up and see if I'm right. His chapter on culture is worth the entire price of the book. See how well I'm doing here. See if it is chapter 7 on culture, because I loved it that much. Is it 7?
Well, in his defense, or to make sure you're not too big-headed, there are several chapters on culture. However, I will say chapter 7 in The Road Less Stupid is called "Culture is King. You Get What You Tolerate."
There we go. Yeah, but here's the other thing I'll say about this book. I love how, literally, multiple times in the chapter, he'll say, "Here it is on a bumper sticker." And it's such a great way to make such a succinct thing from what he's trying to communicate in all these words. And then he goes, "Here it is on a bumper sticker." And he gets it down to just one sentence. Admittedly, I will have to criticize him on this. Some of his bumper stickers are pretty, you have to have a very small font.
It's 2 paragraphs.
Yeah. But still, I love the "here it is on a bumper sticker" concept. It just brings you back and goes, this is the meaning.
And at risk of this sounding like an advertisement, because I wish I got commissions or from Keith. Anybody who knows him, that's not going to happen. But you absolutely should. Yeah, in fact, let's just say, I assure you, because the book's not cheap. I think it's £30 or whatever. For a hardback book,
worth every penny.
Correct. No, and that's my point. I assure you that I would probably bet good money there is not a single person in the United Kingdom, Topher, that has given more money to Keith Cunningham than I have.
Probably right. Probably correct. And happy that you have.
And happy.
Yeah.
Right? I'll say it on X. This will air after I've done it. I've made the decision. I've just not communicated it yet. I'm renewing for another year. I've been mentored for him, and yesterday was like, right, your renewal's up.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm gone for another year. And let's just say it's a very, very, very hefty check.
I'm going to send him this clip. Hey, Keith, here you go. It's a lay down.
It's a lay down. Also, I'm giving him an endorsement. Please give me a reduction in price. Yeah, that's not going to happen.
No.
Yeah, there's no point in even asking. No. And by the way, He sets expectations. He's got a culture. There's no point in asking. That's just not the vibe.
Yeah.
But he is all about value. And genuinely, big number, but is it worth it?
Hell yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. Go and get the book.
Yeah. All right. Cool. Let's move on to quote of the week.
Right. Quote of the week's from the founder and CEO of IDEO, which is a kind of an incubator, right?
Yeah, like an innovation think tank.
Right. And so it's Brian Walker, and it sums this up nicely. Culture is like the wind. It's invisible, but its effects can be seen and felt.
Yeah, so true, so true. Yeah.
Culture is the glue that keeps it all together.
What did Sonia say? If cash is king,
culture is queen. There you go. So as always, if you've liked this episode, if you want a better business, you need to become a better business owner.
Indeed. All right. Thanks so much. If you've liked this podcast, please do make sure you like, subscribe, give us 5 stars. And if you subscribe, you'll get a notification every time a new podcast comes out.
See you next time.
I hope you enjoyed that episode. 3 things you need to do now. Number 1, make sure you subscribe to this podcast so you do not miss an episode. Also, get on over to Amazon to get a copy of my latest book, Turnover is Vanity, Profit is Sanity, 9.5 steps to improving your profits and cash flow. Also, join our Facebook group, the Turnover is Vanity, Profit is Sanity community, to connect with other business owners.